Before Billy Dee Williams became Lando Calrissian, he starred in a forgotten blaxploitation film so controversial it was re-edited and re-released under a different name, directed by a pseudonym, funded by Roger Corman with pocket change, and featuring a soundtrack that became more famous than the movie itself. From deceptive marketing to one-time-only actors, here are the strangest secrets behind this radical 1972 film. Fact 1. The misleading mustache. Marketing scam. If you've ever seen the promotional posters for The Final Comedown, you might remember Billy Dee Williams sporting his signature mustache, looking suave and dangerous as the film's revolutionary protagonist. The only problem is that Williams doesn't actually have a mustache anywhere in the movie itself. Throughout the entire film, he appears completely clean-shaven, without a trace of facial hair. This wasn't some continuity error or last-minute shaving decision during production. The film was shot in 1971, before Williams had grown the iconic mustache that would become his trademark look. So why did the marketing materials show him with facial hair he never had during filming? The answer is simple but sneaky. By the time The Final Comedown hit theaters in 1972, Billy Dee Williams had already filmed Lady Sings the Blues, where he appeared with his now famous mustache alongside Diana Ross. The studio knew that audiences were beginning to recognize Williams with this distinctive look, so they decided to alter the promotional images to match his newer, more recognizable appearance. They essentially photoshopped his mustache onto the posters to make him look more like the Billy Dee Williams that audiences were starting to fall in love with. It was a calculated marketing move designed to capitalize on his rising star power and attract more viewers who recognized his mustachioed face from other projects. Imagine buying a ticket expecting to see the smooth, sophisticated Billy Dee you recognized from the posters, only to watch him appear on screen looking completely different. This kind of deceptive marketing was surprisingly common in the low-budget film industry of the 1970s, where distributors would do almost anything to put more people in theater seats, even if it meant literally changing an actor's face on the promotional materials. Fact 2. Roger Corman's bargain basement budget. Roger Corman, the legendary king of B-movies who gave the world countless low-budget exploitation films, had a reputation for squeezing every penny until it screamed. But even by his notoriously thrifty standards, his contribution to The Final Comedown was shockingly small. Corman's New World Pictures put up just $15,000 toward the film's production budget. To put that in perspective, $15,000 in 1972 would be equivalent to roughly $100,000 today, which is still an absurdly tiny amount for a feature film, even a low-budget one. Most blaxploitation films of the era, while certainly made cheaply compared to major studio productions, still had budgets in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sweet Sweetback's Bada Sas Ba song, released just a year earlier in 1971, was famously made for around $50,000 and was considered extremely low budget. The Final Comedown was working with less than a third of that amount from Corman alone. The rest of the funding came from an American Film Institute grant and other independent sources, but Corman's $15,000 investment represented a significant portion of the overall budget. This shoestring financing meant that director Oscar Williams had to get incredibly creative with his resources, filming guerrilla style in real Los Angeles locations and relying heavily on non-professional actors to fill out the cast. The limited budget is visible in the film's rough edges, inconsistent sound quality, and sometimes awkward staging, but it also gave the movie a raw, documentary-like quality that actually enhanced its message about urban rebellion and social unrest. Corman, ever the savvy businessman, knew that politically charged content could attract audiences even with minimal production values, so he was willing to take a small financial risk on Williams's controversial vision. Fact 3. Blue Note's first and only soundtrack. The Final Comedown holds a unique place in music history as the recipient of something that had never happened before at one of jazz's most prestigious labels. Blue Note Records, founded in 1939, had spent decades establishing itself as the gold standard for jazz recordings, releasing landmark albums from legends like John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, Art Blakey, and Horace Silver. But in all those years of producing some of the most important jazz music ever recorded, Blue Note had never released a film soundtrack. That changed with Grant Green's score for The Final Comedown in 1972. This marked Blue Note's first and, remarkably, only venture into soundtrack territory during its classic era. The label, which had always focused exclusively on standalone jazz albums and sessions, made this one exception for Green's politically charged musical accompaniment to the film. Why did Blue Note break its own tradition for this particular project? The label was going through significant changes in the early 1970s, trying to stay relevant as fusion and funk were transforming the jazz landscape. Green himself was transitioning from the hard bop style he'd been known for into groovier, more commercially accessible territory. The final Comedown soundtrack represented an opportunity to reach new audiences while maintaining some connection to jazz's socially conscious roots. The album featured Green alongside an ensemble that included Barney Perry on soprano saxophone, Clarence Palmer on tenor saxophone, Emmanuel Riggins on organ, and Wilton Felder on bass. Interestingly, while the soundtrack has become a collector's item and is arguably more remembered today than the film itself, Blue Note never attempted another movie soundtrack release. The experiment remained a one-time occurrence, making the final Comedown a curious footnote in both film and jazz history as the only movie to ever receive the Blue Note treatment. Fact 4. The film was secretly remade. 4 years later. In 1976, 4 years after the final Comedown's initial release, something strange appeared in theaters. A film called Blast began playing in various markets, promoted as a new Billy Dee Williams action film. But viewers who had seen the final Comedown quickly realized they were watching essentially the same movie, just repackaged with a different title and some additional footage spliced in. This wasn't a sequel or a remake in the traditional sense. It was the original film, recut and re-released, with new scenes directed by Alan Arkush, who worked under the pseudonym Frank Arthur Wilson to distance himself from what was essentially a recycling job. Arkush, who would later direct Rock and Roll High School and become a respected television director, was working for Roger Corman's New World Pictures at the time. Corman, always looking for ways to maximize profits from his catalog, saw an opportunity. By 1976, Billy Dee Williams had become a genuine star thanks to his acclaimed performance in Lady Sings the Blues and his role in Mahogany opposite Diana Ross. His stock had risen considerably since the final Comedown's modest release 4 years earlier. The strategy was to capitalize on Williams's newfound fame by essentially re-releasing his earlier film under a new name, hoping that audiences wouldn't realize they'd already seen it, or that a whole new generation of moviegoers might be attracted to anything with Billy Dee Williams's name attached. Arkush shot some new action sequences and integrated them into the existing footage, trying to make the film feel more dynamic and commercial. The new title, Blast, was meant to sound more exciting and explosive than the final Comedown, which had a more somber, final-sounding quality. This kind of repackaging was common practice in the exploitation film world, where movies were routinely retitled and re-released to squeeze out every possible dollar from their investment. Fact 5. Director learned filmmaking on iconic sets. Oscar Williams didn't attend film school or work his way up through the traditional Hollywood studio system. Instead, he learned the craft of filmmaking by being present on the sets of some of the most influential films of the late 1960s. Before directing the final Comedown, Williams worked as an intern on two particularly significant productions. First was Bullet in 1968, the Steve McQueen thriller that revolutionized action filmmaking with its legendary car chase through the streets of San Francisco. Director Peter Yates's approach to staging practical action sequences and capturing the gritty reality of urban environments clearly influenced Williams's own guerrilla-style approach to filming the final Comedown on the streets of Los Angeles. The second film Williams interned on was The Great White Hope in 1970, the Martin Ritt drama starring James Earl Jones as a character based on boxer Jack Johnson, telling the story of a black heavyweight champion facing racism and persecution. This film dealt explicitly with themes of racial injustice and one man's fight against systemic oppression, subject matter that would directly inform the revolutionary narrative Williams wanted to tell in his own directorial debut. These internships gave Williams hands-on experience with both the technical aspects of filmmaking and the narrative approaches needed to tell politically charged stories. He observed how Yates created kinetic energy on screen with limited resources and how Ritt handled controversial racial material with both power and nuance. When Williams set out to make the final Comedown with his extremely limited budget, he drew on these experiences, combining Bullitt's raw, documentary-style action sequences with the Great White Hope's unflinching examination of racial conflict in America. For a first-time director working with virtually no money and a politically explosive script, having witnessed these productions firsthand provided invaluable practical knowledge that no film school could have offered. Fact 6. An actor's one and only screen appearance. Among the cast of the final Comedown, one actor holds a particularly unusual distinction. John Johnson, who appeared in the film with the credit Introducing John Johnson, never made another film in his entire life. This was his first screen appearance, and it turned out to be his last. His role in the final Comedown represents his only connection to cinema, making him a one-film wonder in Hollywood history. The introducing credit was typically reserved for actors making their debut with the expectation that they would go on to have careers in the industry. It was meant to highlight fresh talent that audiences should pay attention to and remember. But for Johnson, there was never a second act. After the final Comedown wrapped, he simply never appeared in another movie, television show, or any other recorded performance. There's no public information about why Johnson's acting career began and ended with this single film. He might have decided that the film industry wasn't for him after experiencing the chaotic, low-budget production firsthand. He might have never intended to pursue acting professionally and only participated because of personal connections to the director or producers. Or perhaps he simply wasn't offered other roles and chose to move on to different pursuits. Whatever the reason, John Johnson's sole screen credit creates an intriguing mystery. Everyone involved in the final Comedown, from Billy Dee Williams to the smallest day player, has this one film as part of their filmography, but for Johnson it represents his entire recorded acting legacy. Film historians and cult movie enthusiasts have occasionally tried to track down information about what happened to him after production, but he remains an enigma. In a way, his disappearance from the film world after just one appearance makes him a perfect embodiment of the final Comedown itself, a film about people fighting a system that would ultimately render them invisible. Fact 7. AF. I funded this radical film. The American Film Institute, established in 1967 to preserve film heritage and support new American filmmaking, made a surprising decision in the early 1970s. The organization awarded Oscar Williams an $11,000 grant to make The Final Comedown, one of the most politically radical and controversial projects the AFI ever financially supported. This wasn't just a mild social commentary or a gentle examination of racial issues. The Final Comedown depicted armed urban rebellion, presented black militants as protagonists, and showed violent confrontation between revolutionaries and police forces in graphic detail. For a prestigious organization partially funded by the National Endowment for the Arts and connected to establishment cultural institutions, backing such an incendiary project was genuinely surprising. The AFI's grant represented nearly half of the film's total budget when combined with Roger Corman's $15,000 contribution. Without this institutional support, the film almost certainly would never have been made. The AFI's willingness to fund Williams's vision reflected the organization's commitment to supporting diverse voices in American cinema during a time of massive social upheaval. The late 1960s and early 1970s saw cities burning, the Black Panther Party confronting police, and revolutionary rhetoric becoming mainstream in certain communities. The AFI recognized that American cinema needed to reflect these realities, even if the results made people uncomfortable. Williams's grant application must have presented a compelling case for why this story needed to be told and why he was the person to tell it. The AFI likely saw potential in Williams as an emerging filmmaker and believed that supporting diverse perspectives, including radical ones, would ultimately strengthen American film culture. In retrospect, the grant represents one of the more daring investments the AFI made during its early years, demonstrating a commitment to artistic freedom that extended even to content that challenged the political establishment. Fact 8. Released the same year as Billy Dee's breakthrough. 1972 was an extraordinarily unusual year for Billy Dee Williams' career, creating a split-screen portrait of the actor in two completely opposite roles released within months of each other. On one hand, audiences saw him in The Final Comedown playing a militant revolutionary named Johnny Johnson, who takes up arms against systemic racism and dies in a violent confrontation with authorities. On the other hand, they saw him in Lady Sings the Blues playing Louis McKay, the sophisticated, romantic companion to Diana Ross's Billie Holiday in a glossy, big-budget Motown production that would earn him a Golden Globe nomination and establish him as a major Hollywood star. The contrast couldn't have been more extreme. In The Final Comedown, Williams wore military-style clothing, carried weapons, delivered angry speeches about revolution, and participated in violent action sequences shot guerrilla style on the streets of Los Angeles with a tiny budget. In Lady Sings the Blues, he wore elegant suits, spoke gently to his troubled lover, and appeared in lavishly designed scenes shot on Paramount Pictures soundstages with a multi-million-dollar budget. One film positioned him as a dangerous radical fighting the system, while the other presented him as a gentle, loving man trying to save someone from self-destruction. For audiences discovering Billy Dee Williams for the first time in 1972, which version they encountered first would have created wildly different impressions of who this actor was and what he represented. The timing also created an awkward situation for Williams' career trajectory. Just as Lady Sings the Blues was making him a household name and opening doors to mainstream Hollywood roles, The Final Comedown was presenting him in a way that could have potentially typecast him or made studios nervous about his commercial appeal. Fortunately, audiences and industry professionals could separate the actor from his roles, and Williams's charm and talent in Lady Sings the Blues overshadowed any concerns about his revolutionary character in The Final Comedown. Fact 9. The film never received copyright protection. Here's a strange legal quirk about The Final Comedown that has implications for anyone interested in the film today. Despite displaying a copyright notice on screen that reads, "Copyright 1972 by Oscar Williams and Associates," the film was never actually registered with the United States Copyright Office. This means that technically, the film exists in a legal gray area regarding its copyright protection status. Under copyright law as it existed in 1972, displaying a copyright notice on a published work created a presumption of copyright, but formal registration with the Copyright Office was necessary to fully secure those rights and enforce them in court. The failure to register wasn't necessarily unusual for low-budget independent films of this era, where filmmakers often lacked the knowledge, resources, or organization to handle proper legal paperwork. Many exploitation and blaxploitation films from the 1970s have murky copyright situations for exactly this reason. The consequences of this oversight are significant. Without proper registration, the copyright holders would have faced serious difficulties if they'd ever wanted to sue someone for unauthorized use of the film. More importantly for modern viewers, the unclear copyright status has contributed to The Final Comedown's availability through various public domain and gray market distributors over the years. You can find versions of the film released by multiple companies, often with varying quality, because no single entity can definitively prove exclusive rights to the material. This has actually helped preserve the film's availability when it might otherwise have disappeared into obscurity. If a major studio owned clear copyright and decided the film wasn't commercially viable, it might have been locked away in a vault somewhere. Instead, the ambiguous legal status has allowed it to circulate freely, finding audiences who might never have discovered it otherwise, though often in substandard prints with poor audio and video quality. Fact 10. Product placement for Black-owned businesses. Decades before product placement became a sophisticated, multi-billion-dollar industry, The Final Comedown included something quite unusual for a political drama about urban revolution. Director Oscar Williams deliberately incorporated scenes that prominently featured and promoted specific Black-owned businesses in Los Angeles, effectively turning portions of his film into advertisements for local establishments. Among the businesses given screen time were the Queen Bee restaurant and Harambee clothing store, both real Los Angeles businesses serving the Black community in the early 1970s. These weren't just background details or incidental locations chosen for convenience. Williams made conscious decisions to frame these businesses clearly, sometimes allowing their signage to remain visible for extended periods or having characters interact with them in ways that highlighted their presence. This approach served multiple purposes that went beyond simple product placement. First, it was a form of economic support using whatever minimal cultural capital the film might generate to help boost Black-owned enterprises that were struggling to compete against larger white-owned businesses. Second, it added authenticity to the film's depiction of Black urban life by showing real establishments that audience members from Los Angeles might recognize. Third, it aligned with the film's broader political message about Black self-determination and economic independence. The revolutionary ideology presented in The Final Comedown emphasized that Black communities needed to control their own economic destinies, so featuring Black-owned businesses was a way of practicing what the film preached. Whether these businesses paid for the exposure or whether Williams included them purely for ideological and community support reasons remains unclear, but given the film's tiny budget, it seems unlikely they contributed significant money. More probably, Williams saw an opportunity to help strengthen Black economic institutions while making his film feel more grounded in the actual community it claimed to represent, creating a symbiotic relationship that benefited both the businesses and the film's authenticity. Fact 11. Audiences demanded refunds for the new film when Blast arrived in theaters in 1976. Distributors were counting on audiences either not having seen The Final Comedown 4 years earlier or not recognizing that they were essentially watching the same film with a new title and some additional footage. Their plan didn't work out quite as smoothly as they'd hoped. Moviegoers who had seen the original film quickly realized they were being sold recycled material, and their reactions were not pleasant. According to reports from the time, audience members began demanding refunds from theater managers, complaining that they'd been tricked into paying for a movie they'd already seen. The additional scenes directed by Alan Arkush under his pseudonym weren't enough to disguise the fact that the majority of Blast consisted of footage from The Final Comedown. For viewers who remembered the original, the new action sequences stuck out awkwardly, clearly shot with different film stock and featuring slightly different production values than the 1972 material surrounding them. Theater owners found themselves in an uncomfortable position, caught between angry customers demanding their money back and distributors who insisted this was a different film worthy of a separate ticket price. Some theaters chose to refund tickets to avoid confrontations and negative word of mouth, while others stood firm and pointed to the technically accurate fact that some new material had been added. The controversy highlighted the risks of the exploitation film industry's common practice of repackaging and retitling older films. While the strategy sometimes worked with audiences who hadn't seen the original or didn't remember it well enough to notice, it could also backfire spectacularly when viewers felt deceived. The refund demands probably didn't amount to a massive financial disaster for the distributors, since exploitation films like this rarely played in theaters for extended runs anyway. But the negative reactions definitely limited Blast's commercial potential and ensured it would be remembered as a transparent cash grab rather than a genuine new release. Fact 12. The composer barely appears on his own soundtrack. The Final Comedown soundtrack carries the name of Grant Green, the respected jazz guitarist who had recorded numerous albums for Blue Note Records throughout the 1960s. His name on the cover was meant to attract jazz fans and lend credibility to the music, but listeners who purchased the album expecting to hear Green's distinctive guitar work throughout were in for a surprise. Green's actual playing is barely audible on most of the tracks. The music was primarily composed and arranged by Wade Marcus, a talented composer and arranger who had worked extensively in soul and funk music. Marcus created the bulk of the musical material, conducting the ensemble and shaping the overall sound of the soundtrack. Green was certainly present during the sessions and contributed to the recording, but his guitar is mixed down in most arrangements, functioning as part of the ensemble rather than as the lead voice listeners might have expected from an album bearing his name. This billing situation was somewhat deceptive, though probably not intentionally malicious. Blue Note wanted to market the soundtrack using Green's established name recognition, knowing that jazz fans familiar with his previous albums would be more likely to purchase a Grant Green record than one credited to Wade Marcus, who was less well known despite his considerable talents. For Green, having his name on a film soundtrack represented an opportunity to reach new audiences and earn additional income during a period when the jazz market was becoming more challenging. For Marcus, the arrangement meant his creative contributions were somewhat obscured, though he did receive proper credit in the liner notes for those who read them carefully. The result is an album that delivers excellent funk and soul-influenced jazz compositions, but doesn't necessarily sound like what you'd expect from a Grant Green record. Over time, as the soundtrack has been rediscovered by collectors and hip-hop producers who sampled its grooves, Marcus's contributions have received more recognition, but the original marketing remains a curious example of how artist billing doesn't always accurately reflect who created the music you're actually hearing. Fact 13. Notorious audio sync problems plague releases. Anyone who has tried to watch the final Comedown on DVD or through streaming services has likely encountered a deeply frustrating technical problem. Many available versions of the film suffer from severe audio synchronization issues, where the dialogue you hear is noticeably out of sync with the actors' lip movements on screen. Sometimes the delay is as much as a full second, creating a disorienting viewing experience where you see mouths moving and then hear words emerging noticeably later, like watching a badly dubbed foreign film. This problem doesn't stem from the original production, though the film certainly had its share of technical limitations due to its tiny budget. Instead, the sync issues arose during various transfer processes over the decades as the film moved from theatrical prints to videotape to DVD and digital formats. Without a dedicated rights holder carefully overseeing proper transfers and quality control, the final Comedown was subjected to cheap, careless conversions by various distributors looking to make quick money from a title that existed in copyright limbo. Each generation of transfer potentially introduced new technical problems or compounded existing ones. The audio sync issue specifically suggests that during at least one transfer, the audio and video were digitized separately or at different rates, then improperly aligned when combined. Once this error entered the distribution chain, it was perpetuated through subsequent copies. Correcting such problems requires going back to the best available source materials and performing a careful, expensive restoration process, something no distributor has been willing to invest in for a film with limited commercial potential. The result is that modern viewers trying to discover or revisit the final Comedown often encounter a technically compromised version that makes the film harder to appreciate. The poor audio sync adds an unintentional layer of amateurishness to a film that already struggled with production limitations, potentially causing viewers to dismiss it as incompetently made when the original theatrical version didn't have these particular problems. Fact 14. 3 different titles, 3 different lives. The final Comedown has the distinction of being released under not just 1 or 2, but 3 completely different titles, each representing an attempt to market the same film to different audiences. The original title, The Final Comedown, emphasized the tragic, inevitable conclusion of the protagonist's revolutionary journey, suggesting a somber, serious drama. When the film was recut and re-released in 1976, it became Blast, a title that emphasized action and excitement over political tragedy, clearly aimed at audiences looking for straightforward entertainment rather than heavy social commentary. But there was also a third title that few people know about. According to Motion Picture Association of America records, the film was briefly registered under the title Hollywood. This title remains mysterious, and it's unclear whether any prints were actually released under this name, or if it was simply a working title considered during development or distribution planning. The name Hollywood would have created a completely different set of expectations, possibly suggesting a film about the entertainment industry or about dreams of stardom, which would have been wildly misleading given the film's actual content about urban rebellion. Each title reflects different marketing strategies and different assumptions about what would attract audiences. The final Comedown positioned the film as serious, politically engaged cinema. Blast repositioned it as action-oriented exploitation fare. Hollywood, if it was ever used publicly, would have suggested something else entirely. This title confusion has created ongoing complications for film historians, archivists, and viewers trying to research or locate the film. Different databases and references listed under different names, and people searching for information about one version might not realize that discussions of another title refer to the same film. The multiple titles also reflect the film's unstable identity, caught between being a serious political statement and a commercial exploitation product, never quite settling comfortably into either category. Fact 15. Oscar Williams cited Kurosawa as inspiration. When asked about his filmmaking influences, first-time director Oscar Williams named an unlikely inspiration for a low-budget American blaxploitation film, Akira Kurosawa, the legendary Japanese director behind classics like Seven Samurai, Rashomon, and Yojimbo. Williams specifically cited Kurosawa's philosophy that cinema should instruct as you entertain, a principle that the Japanese master demonstrated throughout his career by embedding moral and philosophical questions within compelling action narratives. This influence is evident throughout the final Comedown, though perhaps not always in the ways Williams intended. Like Kurosawa, Williams attempted to create a film that would engage audiences with exciting dramatic sequences while simultaneously delivering serious commentary on society and human nature. Where Kurosawa examined themes of honor, justice, and human weakness through samurai stories and crime dramas, Williams explored systemic racism, revolutionary violence, and the costs of resistance through his contemporary urban setting. The connection becomes clearer when you consider how both directors used action and violence not merely for spectacle, but as expressions of larger social conflicts and moral dilemmas. However, Williams's execution of this philosophy received mixed results. While Kurosawa was celebrated for his ability to balance entertainment and instruction seamlessly, critics often found the final Comedown too heavy-handed in its messaging, with the instruction overwhelming the entertainment. The film's political speeches and ideological debates sometimes stopped the narrative momentum rather than enhancing it. Some reviewers felt that Williams had learned the wrong lessons from Kurosawa, focusing on the instructional aspect while lacking the master filmmaker's subtle touch and narrative elegance. Despite these criticisms, Williams's invocation of Kurosawa reveals his serious artistic ambitions and his desire to create politically meaningful cinema that transcended simple exploitation formulas, even if his limited budget and experience made fully realizing that vision difficult.